quiet hills of Texas, there is a house, an old, crumbling mansion that has stood for over a century, its walls stained by time and sorrow. Locals call it the Hill House, and for years, they've warned anyone who'd listened to stay far away. No one really knows who built it or who lived there, but the stories, the stories, have been passed down for generations. It's said that the house is alive with the memories of those who once roamed its halls, memories that have not faded, not softened. Some call it haunted, others call it cursed. And those who dare to enter, well, they're never quite the same. You see, it's not just the decay that's unsettling about Hill House. No, it's something else, something darker, something that makes every step feel heavier. For decades, people who have wandered too close to the property have heard strange sounds, whispers carried on the wind, the distant echo of footsteps where no one walks. Others have claimed to hear laughter, a child's laughter, high-pitched and innocent, echoing through the house's empty halls, even though the mansion has been abandoned for years. And then there are the lights, flickering in the windows late at night, casting long shadows that seem to move on their own. But all of that was nothing compared to what happened one cold, restless night when a group of young friends, daring and full of bravado, decided to spend the night inside. They thought it was just an old house, just an empty shell of a building with nothing more than a few eerie rumors attached to it. They couldn't have been more wrong. It wasn't until they crossed the threshold that the true horrors of the Hill House began to wake. Asterisk as night fell and the moon rose high in the sky, the house seemed to shift. The once quiet, dormant mansion suddenly came to life, the creaking of old wood echoing through its halls. The friends, who had walked in with laughter and light-hearted banter, began to feel an unease they could not explain. The air grew colder, as if the house itself was breathing, a slow, heavy exhale, chilling their skin and freezing their breath. It wasn't just the temperature. It was something in the air, something unseen, something that made every sound seem amplified, every shadow feel alive. The group split up, each one exploring a different part of the house. But it didn't take long before the first sign of something wrong appeared. One of the friends, Emma, was standing in the hallway when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. Slow, deliberate, as though someone was walking right behind her, matching her every step. She turned, expecting to see one of the others, but no one was there. The hall was empty. She called out to her friends, but there was no answer. It wasn't just the footsteps that unnerved her, though. It was the way they seemed to follow her, step for step. Every movement she made echoed by something just beyond her sight. Meanwhile, in the living room, Matt, one of the bolder friends, began to explore the old fireplace. As he reached out to touch the mantel, a loud creak sounded above them. He froze. The others, hearing it too, looked up, but no one was upstairs. The house seemed to be shifting, groaning under the weight of something unseen. Suddenly, a door, one that had been standing ajar just moments before, slammed shut with a deafening bang. The sound was so loud it shook the very walls. The group rushed toward the door, only to find it locked, trapping them inside. Panic set in, as the room seemed to close in on them. That's when they heard it, the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter, faint, but clear, drifting down the staircase as if someone was standing at the top, watching them. The temperature dropped even more, and the laughter grew louder, echoing through the empty house. It wasn't playful, it wasn't innocent. It was unsettling, hollow, as though it belonged to something that should never have existed. And then the footsteps started again, but this time, they were coming from every direction. The walls groaned and shook, and the house seemed to come alive with the sound of something ancient, something evil, stirring from the shadows. Fear had gripped the group, but they still tried to escape. Each step they took toward the door felt like a battle against something stronger, something invisible. The hallway, once familiar, began to distort, the walls closing in like the jaws of a trap. The house seemed to be shifting, changing, its very structure bending to some unknown will. With each turn, the rooms grew darker, the air thicker with an oppressive weight that seemed to press down on them. No matter which way they ran, the house turned against them, twisting their surroundings. Every door led to another hallway. Every window revealed nothing but endless night. Then, as if the house itself had had enough of their futile attempts to leave, they saw her. A flash of movement caught their eyes through the dim light. At first, it was nothing more than a blur, but as they blinked, it became clearer. There, in the window, stood a woman. Her face was twisted in agony, her mouth open in a silent scream, her eyes hollow and empty. Her skin was pale, almost lifeless, like something that had long since rotted away. The house groaned, and in that moment, time seemed to stand still. The woman's hand rose, pointing toward the attic, a silent command that cut through the fear like a blade. No one spoke, but they all knew. This was the moment. They had no choice but to follow her, to go where she wanted them to go. With their hearts racing and their bodies trembling, they made their way to the stairs, the laughter still echoing in their ears, louder now, as if it was chasing them, pushing them toward the attic. As they ascended the staircase, they could feel the air getting colder, the pressure building. The woman's presence was everywhere, pressing in on them from all sides. They reached the attic door, and it opened with a loud, unsettling creak, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. The temperature dropped even further, and as they crossed the threshold, they knew that whatever waited for them inside, it wasn't human anymore. The attic was cold, far colder than any place inside the house had been before. The air was damp, filled with the smell of mildew and decay. The ceiling above them was low, the walls seemed to close in, and the wooden floorboards creaked underfoot, as though protesting their every move. There, in the far corner of the room, sat a dusty old chest, its lid cracked open as though someone, or something, had been tampering with it not long ago. They hesitated, standing at the threshold, but the sound of the door slamming shut behind them sent a cold shiver down their spines. There was no going back now. Reluctantly, they approached the chest, and as they did, something stirred in the corner of the room. A flicker of movement, like the shadow of something crawling across the floor. They ignored it, too desperate for answers to be afraid now. One of them, Matt, reached for the chest and slowly opened it. The contents inside were chilling, a worn, leather-bound journal, yellowed with age, its pages crumbling at the edges. He flipped it open, revealing handwritten notes, scrawled hastily in ink that had long since faded to an eerie shade of brown. As they read, the horror began to unfold. The woman they had seen was the original owner of the house, a woman who had lived there over a century ago, a woman who had suffered a violent death, betrayed by someone she trusted. Her spirit had never left, her rage too powerful, too consuming to allow her to rest. The journal detailed her final moments, the terror that filled her as she realized she was trapped in the house, cursed to haunt it forever, unable to escape her violent fate. But just as they reached the final words of the journal, the lights flickered, once, twice, and then went out completely. A suffocating silence fell over them, broken only by the sound of the door creaking open once more. They turned, terrified, to find the woman's figure standing in the doorway, her face now closer than ever, twisted with fury. The journal slipped from Matt's hands as the house groaned violently, and before they could react, the door slammed shut behind them once more. The air grew thick with an unbearable weight. They were trapped again. In the darkness, the sound of footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. And then, just as quickly, everything went silent. The door cracked open one last time, revealing the path out. With hearts pounding, the group fled the house, barely escaping with their lives. But as they stepped outside into the cold night, they realized something chilling. The house, Hill House, was still watching them, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting souls to cross its threshold. No one truly leaves Hill House, and no one ever will. It was a night like any other in San Antonio, quiet, eerie, the kind of night where the air feels thick and the darkness seems to stretch on forever. The streets were empty, not a soul in sight, just the sound of the wind whispering through the trees and the occasional rustle of leaves. A lone man was driving down a desolate road, the headlights of his car slicing through the fog that clung to the earth like a shroud. He wasn't in a hurry, just another late-night drive through the outskirts of town, where the houses were few and far between, and the only company was the sound of his own thoughts. But then, as he passed a bend in the road, something made him stop. There, on the side of the road, was a woman. She stood motionless, wearing a long white dress that seemed to glow in the pale moonlight. Her face was hidden beneath a veil of dark hair, her head bowed in sorrow. She was weeping, the sound of her sobs echoing in the night. The man slowed his car, unsure of what to do. Something about her, her stillness, her presence, felt wrong, unnatural, as if she didn't belong in this world. He rolled down his window, hoping to offer help, to ask if she needed a ride or if something was wrong. But the woman didn't respond. Without a word, she turned and walked slowly toward the woods, her feet gliding over the dirt road like she was floating. There was no hesitation, no glance back, just a steady, mournful pace into the dark, as if the forest itself were calling her. The man watched, confusion creeping up his spine. Why hadn't she answered him? Why had she left without saying a word? His instincts told him to drive away, but something about her, The sadness in her posture, the eerie quiet that surrounded her, compelled him to follow. He turned his car around, the engine's roar breaking the silence of the night, and began to drive slowly down the road, unsure of what he was looking for, but knowing that he couldn't just leave it at that. What happened next would haunt him forever. He parked his car at the edge of the woods, the headlights casting long, distorted shadows across the trees. The fog had thickened, curling around the trunks of the gnarled oaks and creeping through the brush like fingers searching for something to clutch. The man's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped out of the car, his boots crunching against the gravel, the cold night air biting at his skin. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves and the faint, distant sound of her crying. He could hear her now, clearer than before, soft, desperate sobs echoing through the trees, as if she were lost and far away, but so close at the same time. Without thinking, he stepped into the woods. The darkness swallowed him whole, the path ahead barely visible in the dim light. The air was thick with moisture, the ground soft beneath his feet, as if the earth had been weeping for years. He moved cautiously, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the heavy fog. The deeper he went, the louder the crying grew, each sob now a sharp stab in the silence. Then, as he rounded a bend in the woods, he saw her again. But this time, there was no sign of her face hidden in sorrow. She stood facing away from him, her form swaying slightly, as though she were being moved by an unseen force. Her body was rigid, her arms hanging limp at her sides, but she didn't speak, didn't turn. He approached cautiously, his breath shallow, his every instinct screaming at him to turn back. He called out to her, his voice barely a whisper against the wind. But when he reached the spot where she had stood, she was gone, vanished like a ghost into the night. The man froze, his heart hammering in his chest. Panic began to set in, a cold sweat trickling down his back. He turned to leave, but just as he was about to retreat, he heard it, a faint whisper, so soft he almost missed it. "Help me." The voice was coming from below him, from beneath the ground itself. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The whisper repeated, this time louder, more desperate. "Help me." A chill ran down his spine as he looked around, but there was no one, no sign of the woman. Only the heavy silence of the woods closing in around him. He looked down at the earth, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. What had he just heard? Was it real? Was she real? Or had the forest, had the night itself, been playing tricks on him? But before he could react, the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, the soil crumbling slightly as if something, or someone, was moving underneath, reaching out for him. He felt the pull, the unnatural tug on his soul, and without thinking, he ran. His heart was in his throat, his feet pounding against the earth as he sprinted toward the car, the whisper still lingering in the air, echoing in his mind. "Help me." As he burst through the trees and into the clearing where his car waited, the fog seemed to thicken around him, closing in as if it were alive. He slammed the door shut and locked it, his hands shaking. But when he looked out the window, he saw nothing. Just the dark, empty woods. The crying had stopped. But the whisper? That was still with him, haunting him, pulling at him, deeper than before. The air felt heavier now, the quiet suffocating as the man stood frozen in place, staring at the ground beneath his feet. The whisper, soft at first, but growing louder, clearer, seemed to be coming from deep within the earth itself. There was no denying it now. He had heard it, and the voice was calling to him, begging for something he didn't understand. He couldn't leave, not until he found the source, until he discovered what lay buried beneath the dirt. His breath shallow, he dropped to his knees and began to dig. The earth was soft, yielding to his hands with every scoop, but as he dug deeper, the soil grew colder, and the whispers grew stronger, more urgent. Each handful of dirt he removed felt like it was pulling him further into the nightmare. He was no longer just a man digging into the ground. He was being drawn into something far darker, something that had been waiting for him. Finally, his fingers brushed against something hard. The man's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly dug around it, pulling out an old, weathered box. It was small, worn by time, its wood cracked and chipped as if it had been buried there for decades. With trembling hands, he pried the lid open. Inside, there was a collection of yellowed photographs, each one faded with age. The man's fingers trembled as he picked them up, one by one, staring at the faces frozen in time. And there she was, the woman. The same woman who had led him into the woods, the same one he had seen weeping in the road. Only this time, her face was not hidden beneath a veil. Her eyes were wide, terrified, and her expression, frozen in the photograph, was one of deep sorrow. The woman in life had been nothing like the figure he had encountered in the woods. These photographs were proof. They were taken long before the night he had seen her, decades before he had driven down that desolate road. The realization hit him like a wave. She was no longer alive. The woman he had seen, the one who had been crying in the middle of the road, was nothing but a spirit, a lost soul wandering between worlds, forever bound to that place. He had been speaking to a ghost all along. The man stared at the photographs, his mind racing to process what he had just uncovered. His thoughts swirled with confusion, horror, and disbelief. He had been so certain that the woman was real, that she was alive, standing there on the side of the road, crying. But the evidence in his hands told a different story. This was no ordinary woman. This was the crying woman of San Antonio, a spirit trapped in an endless loop of sorrow. But as he stared at the photos, something strange happened. A cold breeze swept through the woods, and he felt a shift in the air behind him. He turned, a chill crawling up his spine. And there she was. The woman, the ghost he had seen earlier, stood before him now, her face pale and lifeless, her eyes empty and hollow. Her long white dress billowed around her, as if caught by an invisible wind. Her expression, once filled with sorrow, was now twisted, frozen in a look of longing and desperation. The man's blood ran cold as her tear-filled eyes locked onto his, and her lips barely moved when she whispered, "I never left." The words hung in the air, haunting him, filling him with a terror he couldn't escape. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body refused to obey. The woman's figure grew clearer, more solid, her presence now undeniably real. But she wasn't human anymore. She was something else, something trapped between life and death, cursed to wander in search of something she could never find. As she reached out toward him, the man finally found the strength to run. He turned and fled through the woods, his legs carrying him faster than he thought possible. The branches seemed to reach for him, the ground seemed to shift beneath his feet, but he didn't stop until he reached his car. Slamming the door shut behind him, he locked it and sped away without a second thought. But as he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw her standing there at the edge of the road, watching him. Her figure slowly faded into the mist, but the terror she left behind was all too real. The man never spoke of that night again, but locals still tell the tale of the crying woman who haunts the roads of San Antonio. They say she's still out there, waiting for someone to hear her mournful plea. And every so often, someone driving late at night will pass that desolate stretch of road and see her standing there, weeping in the moonlight, as if she's been waiting for them all along. Lake Worth has always been a place of eerie tranquility, nestled quietly beneath the trees, its surface like glass, reflecting only the faintest shimmer of moonlight. But behind its serene beauty lies a dark and tragic history, one that has haunted this lake for over a century. In the early 1900s, a woman, whose name has long since been lost to the shadows of time, drowned in its murky waters under mysterious circumstances. Some say it was an accident, others say it was something darker, something no one dares speak of aloud. But one thing is certain, her spirit did not leave with her body. It stayed, drifting among the fog, forever trapped by the curse of Lake Worth. Numerous witnesses over the years have claimed to have seen her ghost. Her form rising above the water, her body half submerged, her long, wet hair swirling around her face. Some have reported hearing the sound of soft, mournful cries carried on the wind, the voice of a woman lost to the depths, forever searching for something she can never find. But it's not just the stories that have given Lake Worth its sinister reputation. It's the things that happen there, things that can't be explained, things that terrify anyone who dares venture close after dark. Those brave enough to swim in the lake at night speak of feeling cold fingers brush against their skin, of seeing shadows moving beneath the surface, of being pulled under, only to find no one there when they come up for air. And as time passes, more and more people have started to believe the legends, the whispers of a woman who drowned so long ago, but who still haunts the lake, waiting for the next soul to cross her path. One summer evening, a group of teenagers, eager to prove their courage and challenge the stories, decided to test the legend of Lake Worth for themselves. With nothing but the moon overhead and the quiet whispers of the trees around them, they swam out to the center of the lake, daring each other to stay as long as possible in the water. The stillness of the night pressed in around them, the surface of the lake barely disturbed by the ripples of their movements. But as they swam, something didn't feel right. At first, it was subtle, a shift in the water, a chill in the air, but then it became something more. One of the teens, Sarah, felt it first, a cold hand brushing against her leg, so cold it sent a shock of ice through her body. She gasped, turning quickly, expecting to see one of the others behind her, but there was no one. No one was near. She called out to the group, but her voice was swallowed by the thick silence of the lake. The others laughed it off, thinking it was just a trick of the mind, the cold night air playing games with them. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was there with them. Suddenly, another ripple broke the surface of the water, this time more pronounced, as though something, or someone, was moving beneath them. The group fell silent, their laughter dying in their throats as they turned to look at the dark waters surrounding them. For a moment, everything was still, but then one of the boys, Mark, shouted in shock, his voice trembling. His arm was outstretched, pointing toward the center of the lake. There, beneath the surface, a dark silhouette was moving slowly, deliberately, as if it were circling them, waiting. Panic set in. The water felt colder now, the air thicker, heavier, as if the lake itself was pulling them deeper. Sarah felt the chill once more, this time unmistakable and unyielding, as though a hand was gripping her ankle, pulling her down. She screamed, trying to kick free, but the hand tightened its grip, dragging her toward the depths. She managed to break free, but when she looked around, she saw the others were panicking too, frantically swimming toward the shore, their faces stricken with terror. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the water calmed. The ripples died down, and the silhouette disappeared beneath the water, leaving nothing behind but the eerie silence of the lake. The group swam for the shore, their hearts pounding, their breath ragged, as they scrambled onto the land, each one looking nervously over their shoulder, unsure of what they had just experienced. The group, shaken and terrified, reached the shore, their hearts racing as the cool night air rushed to meet them. But the safety of the land didn't bring relief. No sooner had they set foot on solid ground than they heard it, a sound that sent ice coursing through their veins. The sound of something moving through the water, slow, deliberate, and heavy. They turned, their faces pale, their breath caught in their throats as they saw it. The figure emerged from the murky depths of Lake Worth, rising from the water like a nightmare made flesh. The moonlight cast a pale, sickly glow on her, and for a moment, they could only stare, frozen with terror. Her face, twisted in anguish, her eyes wide with desperation, was barely visible beneath the tangled mess of wet hair that clung to her face. She moved slowly, but there was no mistaking the malice in her every motion. The way she seemed to glide above the surface, her body half submerged, as if the very water obeyed her will. One of the teens, Jamie, tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat, choked by the terror that gripped her. The figure's hand, pale and dripping with lake water, shot forward, fingers outstretched toward them. It was too late. Before any of them could react, the woman lunged. The air was filled with the sound of frantic splashes as the teens screamed, each one being pulled back toward the water, as if the lake itself had come alive. One by one, they were dragged beneath the surface, their bodies disappearing without a trace, leaving only the ripples behind. There was no time for goodbyes, no time for thoughts of escape, just the cold grasp of the woman's hand pulling them deeper into the lake, into the darkness that waited below. The sounds of their screams faded into the night, swallowed whole by the vast black waters. The morning sun broke through the mist, casting a pale light across the still waters of Lake Worth. The calm, serene surface belied the horrors that had unfolded just hours earlier. When the search teams arrived, they found the bodies. Lifeless, pale, and covered in a thin layer of water, they lay scattered at the edge of the lake, as though the lake itself had decided to return them, broken but intact. There were no signs of struggle, no clear explanation for what had happened. The authorities were baffled, unable to explain the force that had dragged them beneath the water, nor how it had happened so quickly. The teens had been close enough to the shore, yet none of them had made it out. It was as if the lake had reached out with a power no one understood, pulling them into its depths as though they had never belonged in the world above. Locals whispered that the woman's spirit had claimed them, her vengeance complete, her anger never quenched. They said her soul had never found peace, that her death had been too tragic, too violent for her to rest. And now, every so often, she returned to claim those who dared disturb her quiet, haunted waters. Those who ventured too close to the lake after dark would never return, they said. To this day, people speak of the crying woman of Lake Worth, the woman who still rises from the depths, her tortured spirit seeking anyone foolish enough to test the legend. The laughter of the lost teens can still be heard on nights when the fog rolls in, faint and haunting, echoing across the lake, reminding all who dare listen, some spirits are never at rest, and some waters should never be disturbed. The streets of Texas, once vibrant and full of life, became darkened with fear in the 1980s. An unseen terror had begun to stalk the night, leaving behind a trail of horror that no one could explain. It started quietly, with just the whispers of missing persons and unanswered questions. But soon, the bodies began to appear. Found in their homes, cold and lifeless, their bodies unnaturally positioned, as if they had been arranged, posed like puppets by an unseen hand. No one could make sense of it. No one could figure out what connected the victims, or who could be capable of such chilling acts. The police were left grasping at straws, chasing leads that went nowhere, trying to piece together a puzzle that made no sense. Each new discovery sent shockwaves through the community, and yet, there were no suspects, no clues, no explanations. As the bodies piled up, the killer became a ghost, slipping in and out of the shadows, never leaving a trace, never making a mistake. The media began to call him the Texas Ripper, but even that name felt hollow, like a label for something too monstrous to fully comprehend. As the weeks turned into months, the town became a place of whispers and locked doors. People were afraid to leave their homes, too scared to sleep, fearing the killer would strike next. They said the Texas Ripper could be anyone, even someone they knew. Some said he was a ghost, a spirit seeking revenge. Others believed he was simply a man with no conscience, driven by a dark, unexplainable hunger. Whatever the truth, it became clear that he was no ordinary killer. He was something else, something that had slipped through the cracks of the law and into the very heart of the town's deepest fears. It was on a quiet night in the heart of the city when the next victim was chosen. A woman, living alone in a modest home on the edge of town, had heard the soft rap on her door. At first, she thought it was a neighbor, perhaps someone checking in or asking for help. She opened the door, but when she did, she found nothing, only the still, empty night, with no one in sight. At first, she thought it was nothing, perhaps just the wind, but then a sudden unease settled into her chest. She closed the door, chalking it up to her imagination, but as she turned to walk away, she felt something, a cold breath on the back of her neck, so chilling it froze her in place. Her heart began to race, her senses heightened. The air around her felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the house had suddenly grown too small, too tight. She spun around, her mind screaming at her to move, to run, but when her eyes met the darkness of the room behind her, her blood ran cold. There, standing in the living room, was a figure. The shadowy shape of a man, tall and thin, with eyes that glowed in the dim light. Before she could scream, before she could even process what was happening, the figure began to move toward her, its presence cold and suffocating. She backed away, her feet stumbling against the floor, but the man, if that's even what he was, moved faster than any person could, closing the distance between them in an instant. His face was still hidden, shrouded in the darkness, but she could feel him, could feel his gaze fixed on her, colder than ice. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she turned to flee, but the figure wasn't just standing there anymore. He was coming for her. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison, each corner growing darker, the shadows deeper. She ran for the back door, but as she reached for the handle, she felt a hand grab her wrist, cold, lifeless fingers that seemed to reach from the darkness itself. It was too late. The Texas Ripper had found her, and the night was about to claim its next victim. The woman's scream caught in her throat, trapped by fear, as she stared at the man who had now fully stepped out of the shadows. He was taller than she had imagined, his features harsh and distorted, but what struck her most was his grin. It was a twisted, cruel expression, one that seemed to stretch unnaturally across his face, as if it didn't belong there. His eyes, dark and hollow, glinted in the dim light, and in his hand, gleaming cold in the faint glow of the room, was a knife. The blade reflected the light like it had been waiting for this moment, a promise of the horror that was about to unfold. Before she could even comprehend what was happening, the man lunged forward. His movement was so fast, so unexpected, that she didn't have time to react. The knife sliced through the air, aimed straight at her chest. But in that moment, her survival instincts kicked in. She twisted to the side, feeling the cold blade graze her skin, but it wasn't enough to stop him. He was too quick, too strong. In a panic, she fought back, pushing against his chest, but something strange happened then. As she struggled, the man's face began to shift, his features melting and contorting as if they were no longer human, no longer flesh and bone. His eyes grew larger, and his smile widened, stretching impossibly wide, until his face was a grotesque mockery of humanity. And then, in an instant, he was gone, vanished, as if he had never been there at all. The knife fell to the ground with a dull clatter, and the woman was left standing alone, gasping for air, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? Had she imagined it? Was it all some twisted nightmare? The woman stumbled back, her legs shaking beneath her. She glanced around the room. Nothing. No trace of the man, no sign of a struggle, nothing. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. She was alone, but she could still feel the cold presence of something unnatural, something watching her from the shadows. The woman never spoke of that night again. Her mind couldn't comprehend what had happened, and every time she tried to tell someone, the words caught in her throat, choked by the terror that still gripped her. She left the town soon after, never looking back, never daring to return to the house where she had been attacked. But even as she moved far away, the fear never left her. At night, she would often wake to the sound of footsteps outside her window, echoing in the quiet darkness, always followed by that chilling, twisted grin that haunted her thoughts. But the story of the Texas Ripper didn't end with her. No, his presence lingered in the shadows, in the streets, in the dark alleys of Texas, where he continued to haunt the living. To this day, the true identity of the killer remains a mystery. The police never found a trace of him, and the bodies kept piling up, each victim found dead, posed eerily, as if the killer was playing some sick, twisted game. Some say the Texas Ripper was a man, a monster who used his knife to carve a path through the streets, leaving only death in his wake. Others whisper that he wasn't human at all. They believe that he was a spirit, an entity that roams the night, looking for its next victim, its next soul to torment. Some claim that his face, his twisted grin, is forever etched in the minds of those who encountered him, that his eyes continue to follow them, even after they've left the place where he first appeared. The stories still circulate, especially among the older residents, who claim that if you listen closely enough, you can hear the footsteps of the Texas Ripper following you in the dead of night, always just behind you, never quite close enough to catch. The air grows colder, the darkness heavier, and the shadows seem to move with a life of their own. The killer never truly vanished. He's still out there, somewhere in the night, waiting for the next person to step into his world of horror. The Texas Ripper's presence lives on, and as long as the streets remain empty after dark, he will never truly be gone. In the quiet stretches of Highway 90, deep in the heart of Texas, there's a stretch of road that locals speak of in hushed tones, especially after dark. It's a road that's known for its eerie stillness, where the only sound you'll hear is the hum of your tires against the asphalt and the occasional gust of wind that stirs the dry brush along the side of the road. But if you're driving down that highway late at night and the moon is high in the sky, don't be surprised if you see something that doesn't belong. A shadow moving alongside your car, its form illuminated by the faint glow of the moonlight. For years, there have been rumors of a phantom rider that haunts Highway 90. Witnesses, too many to dismiss, have claimed to see a figure on horseback, galloping alongside their vehicles in the dead of night. The rider, draped in tattered robes, is said to appear out of nowhere, riding along the shoulder of the road at incredible speeds. Some drivers have sworn they saw the figure in the distance before it closed the gap between them, matching their pace perfectly, galloping alongside the car, its hooves echoing through the night air. But every time they tried to get a better look, to make sense of what they were seeing, the rider would vanish, just as quickly as they had appeared. Some believe it's a lost soul, cursed to ride that desolate stretch of road forever. Others say it's something darker, a force that exists between life and death, waiting for the next unsuspecting driver to cross its path. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The Phantom Rider of Highway 90 is a legend that continues to haunt the highway, leaving those who witness it with a fear they can't shake, no matter how far they drive. One night, a truck driver found himself driving down Highway 90, a long haul ahead of him. The night was as still as ever, the kind of silence that makes the world feel distant, as if time itself had slowed down. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the empty road ahead. The trucker's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the long stretch of highway that seemed to go on forever. As the truck rumbled down the road, the driver's thoughts began to drift, until a flicker of movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, the shadows dancing in the distance. But then he saw it again, a figure, barely visible, moving at an alarming speed. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what he was seeing. A rider, on horseback, galloping alongside his truck. The horse's hooves pounded the pavement, its mane flowing in the wind, but the rider, obscured by the night, was just a shadow. The trucker felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there. When he looked back at the rider, he noticed something strange. Its pace matched his own, moving alongside him as if it were keeping up with the truck's speed, neither faster nor slower. As the truck continued to hum down the highway, the figure drew nearer, glowing faintly in the moonlight. A wave of unease washed over him, and without thinking, he slowed the truck. The rider did the same. The trucker, unable to shake the creeping dread that crawled up his spine, swerved slightly, trying to get a closer look at the figure beside him. That's when everything changed. The rider's face, if it could even be called a face, became visible. It was grotesque, contorted in a twisted grin that sent a jolt of pure terror through his body. The face, pale and hollow, seemed to ripple like a mirage, unnatural and wrong. The rider's eyes were black pits, voids of endless darkness, and as the trucker's heart began to race, the horse reared up violently, its hooves slamming the ground with a deafening crash. Panic took hold of the trucker. His breath became shallow, his hands trembling as he tried to regain control of the wheel. The horse's shriek echoed through the night, the sound piercing the silence like a knife, and just as the trucker tried to speed up, the rider lunged toward him. His heart stopped, and for a moment, he thought he would be pulled from the truck, dragged into the darkness with the phantom rider. The trucker's heart raced, his pulse pounding in his ears as his hands gripped the steering wheel in a white-knuckled panic. His foot slammed on the accelerator, pushing the truck faster down the road, desperate to escape the nightmare that was chasing him. But the phantom rider was relentless. Every time he tried to push the truck forward, the rider matched his pace, galloping faster, closing the gap between them. The air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating with every passing second, and the trucker could feel the sweat beating on his forehead, the tension in his body like a wire ready to snap. Suddenly, with a burst of adrenaline, the truck swerved sharply to the left, the tires skidding over the asphalt. The headlights flashed wildly, casting eerie shadows across the barren landscape. The truck careened toward the edge of the road, its wheels screeching in protest. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down, time itself stretching out like a rubber band on the brink of snapping. The truck veered dangerously, the man's heart pounding as the sound of hooves grew louder, closer, filling the air with a terrible rhythm. Then, just as the truck lost its grip on the road, something changed. The rider, once so close, so visible, seemed to dissolve into the darkness. The figure vanished, no trace of him remained. The sound of galloping hooves that had been so deafening just moments ago was suddenly gone. It was as if the rider had never existed at all. The truck swerved off the highway, the tires grinding against the gravel as it came to a stop. The trucker's breath came in short gasps, his chest heaving with the weight of what had just happened. He looked back through the rearview mirror, but there was no rider, no ghostly figure galloping behind him. All that remained was the dark road, the fading glow of his truck's headlights, and a strange, lingering feeling that something was still watching him. The phantom rider was gone, but the trucker knew in his gut he hadn't escaped. The rider hadn't left him. He'd just disappeared into the night. Since that night, no one has seen the rider again. But there are stories, whispers among the locals, drivers who pass through Highway 90 late at night. They say the phantom rider still haunts the road, always just out of sight, always just behind the next turn. They say that if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the faint echo of galloping hooves, carried by the wind, reverberating through the stillness of the night. Some say the phantom rider is a lost soul, cursed to roam the endless highway for eternity, never finding peace, never able to leave the road he haunts. They speak of him as a restless spirit, bound forever to the highway, doomed to ride night after night, searching for something. Though what that is, no one knows. They say his presence is a reminder of something tragic, something unfinished, a warning for those brave or foolish enough to venture too close to his path. Others believe he is more than just a spirit. They say he's a warning, a harbinger of disaster, a shadow of death that appears to those who are about to meet an untimely end. They claim the rider's appearance on the road is not a random event, but a signal, a final message from the darkness itself, telling those who cross his path that their time has come. The ghostly figure on horseback is not there to harm, but to lead, guiding them toward their inevitable fate. If you ever find yourself driving down Highway 90 late at night, don't be so quick to dismiss the stories. Keep your eyes on the road, your mind alert. The phantom rider may appear without warning, his hooves pounding the earth as he gallops alongside your car. And if you hear those distant hooves, if you feel that strange chill creeping over you, don't look away. Don't think for a second that you're safe. The rider is out there, waiting for the next soul to cross his path. And if you're not careful, you may find yourself staring into the cold, empty eyes of the rider, only to realize too late that you've driven too far, and there's no turning back. Which of these stories scared you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to share your own eerie experiences. Have you ever encountered something that can't be explained? A shadow in the corner of your eye? A voice in the wind? Don't keep it to yourself, let us know. And if you enjoyed tonight's tales, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another spine-chilling story from the depths of the unknown. Until next time, remember to keep the lights on, because in the darkness, you never know what's waiting just beyond your sight.